So please do use the chat throughout this session. Please do ask questions. I'll be going back and forth into the chat at certain intervals, and I'm going to try and give you as broad a view of things as I possibly can. And then in the Q&A, we can kind of go into the next level of detail. I will also ask, it's kind of tricky with Zoom, but I would say that if you're not on mute yet, please just double check that you are on mute. I will also remind anyone who's new into the room as well. That would be great, just so we can avoid any distractions. So let's get started because we have a lot to cover. Okay, great. So so as Courtney said, my name is Abiola, and I am the chief strategist and founder in Inner Circle, newly appointed head of brand at a skincare brand called Topicals, and as well as have done many, many other things that seem quote unquote unrelated to marketing in the past as well, which have kind of all contributed to what I'm doing at the moment. And have done lots of things, been featured in Vogue, The Cut, have done a lot of work to being doing talent advisory, talent management, and making shows, lots of different things. Here's like a selection of some of the recent things I've been working on, working with like large scale clients, from people like Netflix to also like really viral growing brands like Hue, Skincare, and also Kai Collective. So lots of things happening. I think one of my biggest passions and the thing that makes me excited about marketing is that by being able to use creativity and a bit of business savvy, you can actually create some amazing results no matter the size of your business. And I think sometimes it's easy to think like, okay, well, I don't have the budgets of this favorite brand that I like over here. What can I do? And the answer is the principles are always the same. The budgets may vary, and how the ability that you have to execute all the stuff in your mind or all the things that you come up with may vary at different times. But there is always an opportunity to grow, and you can do it with the least amount of money possible, but also the most amount of money possible. And I've seen that with all my clients. Like, we've done things like go from increase our followers by 70% in a few months to generating over 250K of revenue in 6 weeks, and even less. I think I need to now revisit some of the recent numbers we've been seeing in this last quarter, and also generating things like over 600K views in a month. So this is just like an example of the types of things that I've been working on over the last, let's say, about 5 or 6 years. So one of the things I really want to double down on, and it's a principle that we kind of live by at Inner Circle, is this idea that when hype dies and when algorithms change, it's your community that really drive and carry your brand. And everything that I do and the way that I approach marketing is all tied to how you engage your community. Now, I feel like community as a word has kind of been used and maybe abused a little bit, and it's kind of like, what does that even mean? So again, if anyone has questions about that, we can come back to that later. But I will hopefully touch on this in a way that maybe helps you to think differently or a bit more broadly about what community actually means. Okay, so on the agenda today, so for me, when I think about my approach to marketing and what I've seen has creative results for our clients, is that we really think about how we can help people become remembered even after they turn their phones off. I would ask you this scenario: if you are an avid Twitter user, if you are someone who uses TikTok, not Twitter, and maybe even Twitter to an extent, it has the same kind of function. But how many times have you found a video really funny on your For You page or really interesting, and then the next day, or even that same day, you may not be able to tell who made the video. You may not remember the name. You may not remember anything about it apart from the video itself. This is a challenge I think a lot of us are going to face over the next couple of years, is that as we move to a For You page and algorithmic style form of marketing, people who chase virality only, obviously virality helps everyone, but if you only chase virality, you kind of end up in that space where you get the engagement, but you don't get remembered, and your people don't know where to find you because they can't even remember maybe your name or your brand. So that's something I'm going to talk about a little bit more as time goes on. This is also for anyone who really wants to understand how you can position yourself to your community members more than anything. So not just yourself as an individual, although some of this does apply to personal branding, but your brand and your business. And then anyone who wants to continue to grow. I think as I mentioned earlier, what I love the most about marketing specifically is that it's not just about the creativity, it's about actually being able to build a sustainable business, a sustainable life, a sustainable revenue stream, or maybe even all of the above for yourself. And I think that's incredibly freeing and specifically very important when it comes to like, you know, the Black community, underrepresented communities, especially in the UK, I think is a very, very important thing that we shouldn't be afraid to talk about. You know, we're in business for the passion, but we're also, but it would be great to also be in business and create more freedom, time freedom, financial freedom, executive freedom. When I say executive, I mean like autonomy and the ability to do things outside of, instead of being locked into a work schedule. All of those things are equally important. So I'll pause there. I'm going to quickly have a look at the chat and just have a look at like the different types of businesses that we've got in here. So as I said, I love an interactive session. I love the chat. I think there's a lot that can be learned. So I'm just having a look at who we've got in here. So I'm going to also just read a couple of different company names out now. So we have got Carib UK, which is a self-tanning mousse for people of color. Love that. I think that's so interesting. We have got Kairos Fitness. We have got Sacred Skin, which is all things skincare. We've got Umatoni, which is luxury jewelry brand. We've got Carib Eats London, which is about which I presume is about like food from the Caribbean. I've also got a couple of like note takers in here, so I just need to filter through. We have also got a brand that creates Christian resources, so super, super diverse. And I have a question for everyone in the chat right now, is if you could just rate on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like super confident, know what we're doing with marketing, like just need a little bit more help. Can you give me a rating of how you feel about like marketing right now, how you feel like it's working out for your brand? Okay, great. Phoebe, you are like giving us some model behavior in the chat, because you are the first person in the chat to introduce yourself and the first person to answer this question, which I love. So we have got 5, 7, 6, 6, 2, 6, 6, need it in my life, 2, 4, 5, 4, 4, 4, 3, 5, 4, 5. Okay, so quite a range, and we've still got a few. Ruben, -2. Thank you for the honesty. And you know what? It's good to come in and like be clear on where you're at, and there's no shame in that. And like it's very easy to, I wouldn't say it's very easy, but it's very straightforward to kind of increase that -2 to at least, let's get at least in this conversation, at least to the baseline of 1. And then Brenda says, traditional marketing, I know. Digital marketing, I need to learn a bit more. Great. And then we also have Jennifer saying that she's got Afro Lit Stories, which is and then the medium, it's medium, I'm interested in growth. Okay, so medium, I presume, is a 5. Great. Okay, thanks everyone for your answers. It's very helpful to kind of just get a gauge of where people are at in their journey. And I would say that no question is a silly question. Please do ask them in the chat. Maybe don't ask them now, because if you do, they may just get lost. Maybe when I ask, just like save your questions for that moment, and then I'll be able to see all the questions at once. So I'm going to cover all the foundations. I'm going to cover the foundations kind of in 2 ways, and then we'll just take it from there, and we will keep it nice and open. Okay, so as you probably know, a change in strategy can change everything. So sometimes when people approach me about marketing, they talk a lot about what they should post on social media, which is important, and we're going to cover it, but it's not the first thing that you should be asking. And I think this is the thing that people sometimes underestimate. They expect that when we have like marketing sessions, that one of the main questions will be like, okay, so these are the trending things that you need to post. I think I can at the end maybe even recommend a lot of Instagram accounts that show you what music is trending. I love a trending sound, and I always say this to everyone I work with. They love a trending sound. That is not a strategy. A strategy is a big picture approach to how you're going to go to market in a way that isn't as like doesn't change as frequently as a trending sound changes, right? Which they kind of change like every 2 weeks to like a month if you're lucky. Great. So I split it into 4 sections, and there's still more to talk about, but these are kind of the 4 foundational things. I always say with marketing, it's kind of like an iceberg. So you have all the stuff that people see, but then you have all of this stuff underneath that maybe the public doesn't see, but is essential foundations to really making that stuff at the top like really sing. So the first one is that before you even talk about how you can promote all your products, you need to be able to keep a 1 to 3 product strategy. And this sounds like very counterintuitive to how things are done have been done traditionally, but we are in a very different world. The thing about digital marketing specifically is that digital marketing is like, it kind of removes a lot of the historical layers and barriers to entry that we had around being able to sell our products and services. And that also means that the way that we do things needs to change. So normally when I say to people, okay, what are your 1 to 3 products? They're like, yeah, but I want to sell this and this and this and this. And I'm like, that's great. And you don't need to take them off the table, but you also don't need to promote all of them at the same time. And this is like a critical piece. I'd say if there was one thing that I would take away from this session, I would actually say it's this more than anything. It always catches people by surprise, but it's extremely important. And this is because your customers, they can't focus on multiple things at once. Especially think about like your own life, your own day-to-day. You have family, friends, work, maybe side project.
Product focus, new line.
Hello. Hi, can I have everyone on mute, please? I know when you come into the Zoom room, it doesn't automatically mute you, which can be a bit confusing, but just quick reminder to please, please put yourselves on mute if you can. Thank you. Okay, great. So because you're, like I said, think about all the things that you're doing in your own world. You've got friends, you've got family, you've got one business, maybe multiple businesses, maybe you've also got a job, you've got, to look after your health, your relationships, all of these things, to then be able to be introduced to a brand new brand that has 20 products. It's difficult to then understand who is this brand and why do they exist in the market. So I always say that when you go out and you're like, okay, we've got these 10 dresses, or we've got these 40 different let's say books, it's a bit difficult to know what you're known for. And I'll give you some business examples as we go on. What the first thing that you want to do, especially as you're building a business, and given all the different ratings people put in the chat, you're kind of at like, like a -2 to like a 5. It's likely that the businesses are not yet huge enough that people know them as a household name, right? So we're all in the process of really building up people's ability to recall us. So there's a word called recall in marketing, which is basically this idea of like, if someone's walking down the street or if someone sees your logo, they can recall the last time they've seen it. Most of us are new businesses. Most of us are small businesses. That time, the ability to be like, oh yeah, I've seen that. Like if you see, I don't know, Heinz ketchup logo, you'll be like, I've seen that before. I recognize that. That's going to be a bit low for us at the beginning. So you want to make it easy for people to remember who you are and what you're about. And this is what these questions really are. It's like, what is this brand actually about again? And like, why do I care about them? If you're going to someone with like 20 different offers, 10 different offers, it's kind of hard for them to have a hook to be like, that's the brand that's great, that's going to help me get in shape. That's the brand that's going to give me the best rice and peas that I've had in London. Like you need to kind of have one priority thing to lead with. So what does that mean? So one of the other reason why I like to kind of narrow things down to 1 to 3 products is because launching and promoting products, every single product should really get a lot of treatment in terms of how to promote. Like there's no point in launching 10 and then only having the energy to really promote one. This is another reason why I say like I'm very big on, and if you follow me on Instagram, you'll probably know that I'm very big on an MVP, which is your minimum viable product. I'm always thinking, and literally every single thing I do is what's the minimum that I can do that has the maximum impact. Sometimes I think we default to thinking, okay, I need to do these 40 things at once, whereas the phrase Rome wasn't built in a day still holds true. The brands that maybe you look to as aspirational or where you're trying to get to, if you look at their history, for the most part, they launch with 1 to 3 either products or 1 to 3 stories. Sometimes, like, for example, if we're talking in the food context, you may actually have more than 1 to 3, right? Because you're selling meals, but in that there's like there's a through line, which may be like I've mentioned specifically, like all of your dishes have rice and peas, or you're very known for like grilling chicken in a certain way. So like it varies depending on your industry, but in principle, the principle kind of remains. And you need to continually ask yourself, like, do we really have the capacity to replicate this kind of marketing for every single one of our products, to give our products the love that they deserve? Do we really have the time and the energy to go that hard every time? I think make it as a founder, as a small business owner, as someone who's marketing in a startup environment, there's only a limited amount of time, right? Even the startups that look big, like I work with startups that people think are just doing like amazing, and we are still very much trying to do one thing at a time because we just don't have the capacity. We don't have 1,000 people teams. Like there's just not that capacity at all. The other thing is that when you come to the market with many, and when I say to the market, I just mean when you launch and put your stuff out there, when you come to the market with so many things, what happens to people is the paradox of choice. Does anyone in the chat know what the paradox of choice is? Silence in the chat. So I'm going to take that as a no. So the paradox of choice is basically that when you give someone, sometimes what we do is we give people multiple options because we want them to at least pick something. We don't want to be rejected. We don't want them to say no. But actually, when you give people a ton of choices, it doesn't actually make it easier for them to pick. It can actually become harder, and because you've now given them too much information to make a decision, so they just don't make any decision. So sometimes we think, okay, I'm going to release this and this and this just to see what people like. I get that. Like I said, it doesn't have to happen all at the same time, because when you do it all at the same time, people don't know where to look, and then they just move on to the person next door, to the next person in the FYP who's making it super clear what's actually on offer. Okay, cool. I've had a few people coming up answering the question now, coming in and saying, yeah, too many options, you get overwhelmed and you leave it. So that is something you need to be really aware of. So I'll give you a brand example, which I think is actually a really great example of this, because you could assume that they wouldn't need to do this because they had so much celebrity behind them. And this is like Road Skin, right? So they basically launched with like one product / one offer. And it was this idea at the beginning of like glazed donut, right? So that was a phrase that was really emanating through the internet. This idea that Hailey Bieber has glazed donut nails, she has glazed donut skin. Like that was the offer. It was like, if you buy into what I'm offering, you're going to have this like clean glazed look. That was the story. And then in terms of the products that she actually offered, she only offered 3. She offered a moisturizer, a serum, and the serum was the main like glazed donut story, and then this kind of supported it, and then lip balms as well. And obviously, technically, there's 3 lip balms there, but they're just flavors, right? They're not offerings. It's like, so you get a serum, a moisturizer, and lip balm. Like, it's very easy to remember. It typically mainly led with the serum, and it was one singular story. Since then, you might be saying, okay, well, right now she's got loads of other products. Correct. And this is what I'm saying about being able to roll things out and launch over a time period versus then doing everything at once. We all have big dreams. We all have huge aspirations, which I think is important and I think is really valuable. It doesn't mean we have to do it all at once. And this is very, very important. The benefits of this approach are many. I've kind of touched on some of them before, but first of all, it's also like very scalable. So if you do it once and you do it right, you can then repeat it because you would have learned and you wouldn't have burnt yourself out. And the other thing is that because she, in her example, she used the same glazed donut language, it was the same psychological levers to get people interested, to get people going about a particular product. So the promise here was like, glazed donut, right? That could be a glazed donut on your on your skin surface. That could be a glazed donut as an additional moisturizer. That could be a glazed donut on your lips. But that was the one singular story. So as I would just put that back to you all to start thinking about what is your one singular story, or what are your 1 to 3 products, ideally related or like have some kind of similar theme that you're going out to the market with. You may have additional products like floating in the background that you want to drop after, but the easiest thing and the quickest way to also see results is to be really, really focused. And I think founders sometimes struggle with this because it can be a bit scary because you're like, okay, well, I don't want to, I want all the options. I don't want to like close myself off to opportunity, but you actually will. The more you offer, the more you do, because you create confusion, you burn yourself out. It's too many things at once. Okay, great. So that's number 1, which is really important. So you need to have a 1 to 3 product strategy / like a singular marketing messaging. I've got 4 kind of key pillars in this, and then we can take it to questions. So just a reminder, we have 15 minutes for questions at the end, which I'm really looking forward to answering. And I will, so please do save them, and then we can put them in the chat at the end. So don't put them in just yet, just in case I like miss anything. Okay, so now this is like the next essential pillar of when it comes to actually being able to market and put yourself out there, is you always need to ask why. And like, again, these might feel like very like philosophical strategies, but this is what's important. Sometimes I meet people who say, okay, we want to put this up on Facebook ads. Great, love that. And if we wanted to, we could do a whole session on how to set up a Facebook ad. But anyone, and I used to be I used to manage a Facebook ads team. in a previous life at an agency, right? We just used to do Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, podcast, all of that. One of the key things that anyone who runs ads tells you is that you need to test. And one of the biggest things that you test is your creative. So the visuals, whether it's a video or photo, and you also test your captions. But the question of what to put in that video and captions is like the why, right? So it's why would people care? Because sometimes I see, and I see it myself on Instagram, I get some ads sometimes, and I'm like, I wish this person actually never did put up this ad, because actually what it's clear to me that they've done is maybe they've gone down the ad route before they figured out their creative, their storytelling. That is the biggest thing in digital marketing that can actually help you achieve the results that you want without even having to pay for ads in the first place, if you've got like a really good organic non-paid strategy. So a couple of harsh truths. And anyone who knows me personally knows that I speak very frankly, especially when it comes to marketing and business, because we're not here to spend 3 years and not making any progress, right? We're here to kind of do things, and we all want to see results, even if they're incremental. So I'm always thinking, how can I get people that I work with, people that I speak to, how can I get them to their first, how can I get them to their first customer or their first step, so that you can start to see progress rather than like feeling like you're banging your head against the wall, right? So the harsh truth is that all products and services have competitors. So sometimes I talk to founders and they're like, well, I don't really have any businesses that I'm inspired by because no one's doing what we're doing. And that may be true in some ways. People may not be doing exactly what you're doing, but they're operating in the space that you occupy. The other thing is that everyone has desires, fears, ambitions, and things that we identify with. So if a founder says to me, well, no one's ever offered this product, I'm like, that's great. And I'm happy that you've been able to carve out a specific niche in terms of the problem you're solving or the service you're offering. But sometimes, and I think most of us know this, even if your product isn't the best or the most effective, it can still do well, because being the best doesn't really matter if you can't get anybody to care. And as a default, I always think about, like, when I go out in the world, I always think no one cares as much as I do, because they haven't spent as much time with the product. They don't know, right? Remember I said, you've got many things going on in your life. Why would you care? You have to make them care. And this is what, for me, the biggest part of marketing is about. And this is why I say you have to start with your why before we say, oh, I want to do that trending TikTok sound. I want to pay for Facebook ads. I want to do a billboard. What are you going to put on those spaces that's going to make people care enough? That is the number one thing that matters first. And the best way to do that is to ask, like, why, and then, like, after you've got your why, ask how. So that would be, why would someone care about what I'm offering over what they've seen and they've known before? It's much easier for most of us to just stick to what we know, right? There's a phrase, better the devil you know. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. It's actually quite hard to get people to try something new, even if the new thing is like 10 times better, gonna help them so much more. If you haven't tapped into why they should care about that, it's going to be very difficult to A, catch their attention, and B, convince them to part with their hard-earned money. So you have to ask yourself, how can I deliver a promise or solve a problem in a way that stands out? Now, remember in my previous slide, I said that all humans have desires, fears, ambitions, and things that we identify with. And that's what we're going to go into. So we're going to have like a mini psychology session right now, because that is actually what makes marketing, like, that's what makes people's marketing stick. Like, I work with a brand that has never, I'm just thinking, I'm double checking my facts, has never, ever paid for influencer marketing because they don't have the budget. They're a startup. What they have, though, got is they have some of the biggest influencers in the world literally posting their content and tagging them. And it's because they've spent years and years creating an environment that people want to be part of the movement, whether or not they're paid. That is like a dream scenario. One, because it's great for saving money, it's more sustainable. And it means the minute that you turn off like the funding that you're putting behind that, you've got something real that lasts. And that's because they care. Because why would they do it? Especially professional creators who get paid to post. Why would they be posting you if they didn't care, right? So this is like a very, very important topic. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So I'm giving you like a historical example, and then I'm going to also give you, it's kind of modern to be honest, but I'll give you a modern example, and then like a modern / historical example, and then I'll give you an even more modern example. So Calvin Klein underwear. So this is an ad from, I think, earlier this year with Jeremy Allen White from The Bear. And it's like him against the backdrop of New York, you know, in his undies, like in a very kind of like sensual photo shoot, right? So it's effortless because he doesn't look like, he looks like he could have just rolled out of bed. You know, it's shot in the middle of a city on a rooftop. It's not shot in like a really high maintenance studio. It's casually desirable. And it's also current and relevant. And there's a couple of other shots of this. The duality isn't in this particular shot, but there's a couple of other shots in this campaign that reflect that. And this has like been an ethos of Calvin Klein as a brand for a long time. This idea that it's like attractive and aspirational, but it's effortless. So when I talk about desires and fears, this taps into the customer that wants to feel elevated or feel desired, but with that, but not necessarily feel like not feel like they look like they have tried, right? So this is tapping into a specific person. And bear in mind, I didn't say that Calvin Klein taps into white men who are in their 30s, like Jeremy Allen White. I didn't say that. I actually only said someone writing on the screen. I didn't say that. I only said this is a person who wants to look effortless yet aspirational. That is the difference between, that is a psychographic, right? That person could look like anything. They could be any age, any ethnicity, any gender, but they all have the same desire, which is to look effortless and yet be aspirational. This is not about like, oh, we're targeting a white man who is in his 30s. It's actually not about that. Now, obviously, there may be some sub layers of that, but the top line angle isn't that anymore. That's no longer where marketing is, and it's not been there probably for about 30 or 40 years. And the reason I include Calvin Klein is because they've got a history of being very consistent with this, right? So in one of their much earlier adverts in the very early 90s, they had Marky Mark, and they also had, who was like a very like popping kind of like rapper at the time, and a really young Kate Moss, who people actually didn't really know as like the supermodel that people know now, but she was just like someone with a really interesting look that didn't look like what models had looked like prior to her coming on the scene. But the vibe of these two photos is very similar, right? So I mentioned the New York backdrop. Here they are actually still in a studio, but it's so relaxed. You kind of, it feels like you've caught them in a moment, right? They haven't gone somewhere. They're not dressed up. The hair and the makeup is very similar in both of these shots. I've got a scribble on my screen. I hope that is a positive one and not a negative one. It's kind of, you know, there's a lot of desirability in it, and they're in jeans, right? They could have been in any other clothing that previewed the underwear, but it was jeans. Again, back to this idea of like casualness and effortlessness. And like all these photos, you may think, oh my gosh, this is like deep psychoanalysis. Is this really like what was going on? The answer is this is definitely what was working. Maybe Calvin Klein at the beginning was creating it as an extension of himself, which is what many founders do. But from there, it's a theme that like we are now comparing 1993, I think, to like 2024. So the gap is 30 years and the brand has been consistent. This is what we talk, and this goes then on like all your digital marketing channels. This could go on social, this could go on Facebook ads, this could also go on traditional marketing like a billboard. Your story is the most important thing before you think about like, okay, which channel does it go on? And now I will also give an example from Topicals. So as Courtney had mentioned before, I recently joined the company as the head of brand. So this actual campaign existed without me. So it's like bias free. And I was also a fan of the brand since the day it launched. So I can also talk about this from a customer perspective. So I will use this example of Topicals' launch of their Slick Salve lip balm, which is like a deeply hydrating lip balm that is great for people, especially if you have like dry, cracked and chapped lips, right? And this campaign, I think, is like a great example, although all their campaigns do this. All of their they have a couple of like key principles that you can see are communicated, and that's why people love the brand so much, right? So the data shows that they are like they have been one of Sephora's fastest growing skincare brands. They have also they were sold out of this particular product for like 4 months or something, which again is like it's a dream scenario for many brands. Now, some of the words I put here are imperfect. So one of the things that they always try and do is like cast. So for example, Baby Africa has an uneven skin tone. And traditionally in beauty, you were always served with like people who had no blemishes whatsoever. And the idea was like, if you buy our skincare, you're going to look like this airbrushed, flawless person. Here, like topicals is more like, you know, we have flare-ups, we're human beings, and we enjoy ourselves and we see our skin as an extension of our personal style, no matter whether we feel like our skin is good or bad on that day. Is good or bad even a thing, right? This is something to be celebrated, which also allows people to feel seen. It's creatively cool, this idea of like they launched a lip gloss or a lip balm with a movie idea, and like it had this whole Ocean's 11 theme. There's no, you could have just said we have this lip balm and like this is why it's so good for your lips, and talked about the product, the actual like function of the lip balm, but instead they focused on like this idea of like introducing a film that many people had watched, which is the Ocean's whole franchise. I know there's a lot, there's like 4, I think, of the Ocean's films, like Ocean's 11, Ocean's 8, and a few others. And again, which is very, very aligned with culture, plus also casting the rapper Rico Nasty in this, right? So and also casting people of color, which were historically excluded from skincare in general. So there's a lot of things going on here, which is about reflecting people's like aspirations into the creative. So yes, reflecting people's demographics, but it's more than demographics, right? Because it could have been, we know that all people of color don't necessarily all wear grills or all are rappers, right? But they've tapped into specifically like a female rapper who's also kind of like a punk. She's like a punk she kind of does punk rap. She has specific wording for her type of music. I need to remember what it is. And also celebrating this idea that you can actually feel seen and feel safe here. You don't need to fall into an unattainable standard of beauty. You can just show up as yourself, and actually that allowed people to relax and buy into the brand and feel represented within the space. So all of this, I've said a lot. I've spoken about Calvin Klein, I've spoken about topicals, I've spoken about creatively cool, I've spoken about effortlessness and all these different things. All of this is like marketing KYC. So in banking, there's a phrase which is KYC, about like understanding who is in your bank, which is very important for like the law and regulation. But for marketing, I think it's the same thing. You need to know your customer inside out. You should be asking yourself, I always say to people, like, can you like distill your target customers into 3? I would even say you can even start with 1 and talk about them in the same level of detail as you would your best friend. So when I say that, I mean like, if your brand was a person, where would they eat? What music would they listen to? What artists do they like? What do they wear? Where do they shop? All of that is going to help you tell a stronger story, because eventually you'll realize that, okay, actually my desired customer is actually someone who is always I don't know, listening to reggaeton, and that may take you into a space where you're looking at, okay, in the reggaeton scene, how do they communicate, and bringing some of that, even if your brand has nothing to actually do with reggaeton, bringing all of that into your skincare brand, for example, bringing all of that into your jewelry brand. That sometimes it seems like unrelated. It's like, well, what has like a movie got to do with lip balm? Nothing. But you know what they both have in common? They have in common a customer who is not a monolith. None of us wake up and only think about shopping our favorite brands. We think about all these other things around us, right? The things that we want to achieve in life, the ways, the community groups that we want to fit in with, the music that we like, the aesthetics that we like. All of that is what makes a person. And the more you can hit all of those in one persona, the more effective you'll be. And again, you might feel like, well, aren't I cutting myself off to a certain type of person? I would say my response to that would be a phrase, which is a super common phrase, which is, when you try and cater to everyone, or when you try and speak to everyone, you speak to no one. Again, all of this is about steps. And your first step should be trying to narrow it down to as well-defined a group as possible. And then over time, building out as you go. But you can't be for everyone at first, just because you just don't have the bandwidth. You don't have the team, you don't have the resources, you don't have the time. There's only 24 hours in a day. You have to think small and do something. I'd rather do something really well with these 10 people over here and get 10 people to love me than like try and attract all 7 million people in London at once. It's just going to be, there's too many things, there's too many variants, and it's very difficult to pin down. So, okay, so that's number 2. So we've spoken, number 1 was all about like having a 1 to 3 product strategy. And number 2 was all about really trying to know who your customer is. Now, number three is kind of connected to knowing who your customer is, right? So again, another thing to think about and keep in mind is like, can you talk about your three customer types in the same level of detail, or one customer type, doesn't have to be three, you can start really, really simple, in the same level of detail as you can about your best friend or your sibling or your family member, someone that you know deeply well, or even yourself, you know? I work with a team where we say we don't put anything out unless we say, will this person who we've modeled, like they're a famous person, we have used them as an example of our ideal customer. We're like, will this person ever wear that? Would this person say that? Would this person follow this kind of thing on Instagram? All of that, that's our filter for everything. And we're not trying to do more than that at this stage. Okay, great. So expand your content beyond your product and service. Now, this is like a big one, which sometimes can be a little bit controversial for people, but as time goes on, I become like even stronger and stronger, like dig my heels in, and I'm like, you need to stick to this if you can. So first thing, for most of us, outside of your website and your newsletter, especially when we think about your social and your digital marketing, unless it's very bottom of funnel, which again, we can talk about funnels maybe in the Q&A, but at this point in time, I'm just going to pause on that, because right now, when we talk about marketing, we're thinking about reaching and engaging new people, not necessarily selling to the same people that already know us. For the most part, say no to the product photos. So say no to just having a photo of your item and like posting it every 3 posts on Instagram, or like hovering the phone over it every other post on TikTok, unless something spectacular is happening with it. Like, I don't know, unless this is a giant, this is like a 40 milliliter thing of cheesy sauce that someone's pouring into their mouths. That's, to be honest, that's also not even a product photo, which kind of leads me to my next point, is that you shouldn't be having, for the most part, products that just like look like this. Looks great and it works really well for your website because people need to see what they're buying. But in terms of engaging an audience and being remembered after people turn off their laptops or turn off their phones or log off for the day, this is not really going to help. And I think people at first are like, wait, why not? Because isn't this what I'm selling? And it's basically because, like I said, it's useful for people seeing what your product is, but it's not necessarily useful for connecting to the why. It doesn't connect to a need or a desire or an aspiration. It's just a product of a jar of cheese, right? And the same applies to like general company updates. So people sometimes say, and this has happened a lot with Instagram, with TikTok recently, where people will say, oh, well, you should do a day in the life of yourself and get people to be, and that should be your social strategy. I'm like strongly against that, because I think, well, again, back to my harsh truths in section 2, why would someone care? Some of the most successful day in the lives, or what's in my bag, etc., is because there's an interesting hook in there. So like doing a day in the life is not interesting unless maybe it's the day in the life of either a celebrity that people know or someone who's done something exceptional that aligns with the aspirations and desires of your audience. Or what's in my bag is only interesting when maybe the stuff being pulled out of the bag, again, aligns with the aspirations, desires, needs, and fears of your audience. So always think about, it's less about what you should post, and again, why should you create the specific piece of content and where should it live. So a great example of this is Red Bull. So Red Bull apparently, like I will not speak for them, I've never worked in Red Bull, but it's like a very well-known like industry thing that they have a rule that on their social media channels they don't have any product photos, and this is like a snapshot of their feed. They don't just have like a can sitting in a fridge or on a shelf on its own, right? There's always an integration somewhere. So for example, in this at the bottom of this moment of this grid, you have like a can there, but it's in the hands of a surfer who looks like she just won some sort of competition. You have this guy about to like jump off this ramp into what looks like just the ocean, which is literally insane. Other things we have here are, you know, someone cycling and about to do another ramp in the middle of like a snowy hill, someone jumping off a helicopter, these really, really dramatic sports. And that's because what they have decided to align themselves with in this context is Red Bull. If you have lived in the UK as long as I have, you may have heard the original ad, which was like Red Bull gives you wings. It's this idea that Red Bull allows you to unlock the adventurous thrill seeker in you. It gives you the energy to be your highest, most fun person who kind of like, it's uninhibited, right? It's very human. It's like, oh, is he about to jump off this building? It's not saying, watch as this person uses Red Bull to jump off this building. No, again, it's still very like colloquial. It's very energetic and very dynamic. So it really captures the people who are like super excited by this. Now, again, like I said, it doesn't mean that there aren't other people who will buy it because they just need an energy boost. But the story that they're leading with is this idea of like, at the point of your like highest achievement, your highest adventure, your highest thrill, Red Bull is there to kind of give you the boost you need to get across the line, to make the jump. And even if you fall over, you're good because you can get back up and do it again. None of that could you get from a picture of a can of Red Bull, but you can get it when you see people engaging in all of these like adventure sports. So you might be thinking, okay, well, I can't fly people to the Alps and do like a whole thing, but here are some things that you can think about doing when it comes to your content. So as I've been speaking, you may have had like an idea, which, oh, maybe I could explore this. I would say first thing to do is like serialize it. So if you have that one idea, turn it into a recurring series, right? Because that gives people a reason to keep coming back and expecting the same thing. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. It's also very easy. Like I said before, I love things that are low effort, high impact. I am like, I'm hardworking and I'm organized, but I also know that you do not have to struggle and reinvent the wheel every single time, right? If you find something that you think is going to really work, make it a series. It gives people something to remember. Remember what I said about, especially on TikTok, your For You page, serving you so many videos at once or like over a 2-hour period that you have a great time, but then you forget who the person is that made it. If you have someone who is giving you the same format of content every single time, it's easier to remember. You might remember a phrase that they always use in that video. You might remember a hashtag they always use. And that means they're, again, getting remembered. You get that recall that I mentioned at the beginning. You also want to think about how you trigger conversation. Now that goes back to your why, right? So if you're a brand that is built upon the like the self-determination of women, right? You may want to trigger conversations that are, I wouldn't even say trigger, let's say inspire conversations that are in that space. And remember that content is like always a combination of things. Like there are no hard and fast rules. There's guidelines for you to then kind of like mix the ingredients in your own pot and come up with a combination that works for you. So even if you are saying, okay, well, we've got this, you know, Beyonce wore our dress, great. So why else do people care? Like how do you contextualize that in a wider way that gets people really interested? Great. Okay. So recap quickly. Number one is have a 1 to 3 product strategy. Number two is to really know your customer. Number three is to like basically say no to the product photo as much as you can and give more context to your content. And then number four is go behind the scenes. So this is less content and customer focused and more, I would say, like, people say it's more digital marketing. I say it's more operational and like more numbers based, let's say. So numbers don't lie, which is super important. So here's one of the things that gets missed a lot for people is that the stuff that people don't see, especially on social media, actually drives 40 to 60% of sales, if not more. If you do it really well, it can cost you about $5 to acquire a customer versus what it would cost on ads, which is maybe like $30, $50, $60 per customer, right? So if you're saying, I want to get 100 new customers. If you do it well on your channels without ads, it will cost you like, let's say if it was costing $5 per person and you wanted 100, it will cost you $500 or £500. I always use dollars just to be international. Or if it was to cost you that in Facebook ads and it costs $25 per person and you want 100, you'd be spending 2,500, right? So you can actually save a lot of money if you set things up the right way. And it gives you zero reliance on the algorithm, which I don't know about you, but to me, that is music to my ears because I think since the pandemic, we've probably seen at least 3 or 4 dramatic algorithm changes that make you feel like if you nailed it this year and suddenly everything's changed and you spend 6 months trying to get it right, and then you spend 6 months trying to get it right, then you get 6 months of it working really well, and then something changes again, and you kind of have to start from scratch. So I love this like behind the scenes type of strategy and behavior, and I'll talk about what it is in a minute because it just like eliminates all of that, which is fantastic. So I would say that the 2 core elements of this are basically like send really good emails and don't be afraid to send a text. I have worked with many people who, and this can be influencers, this could be business owners, it applies to anyone who exists on the internet. Many people who, let's say you have 10,000 followers, but then I say, how many people have you got on your email list? And they're like, oh, I've got like 100. And I send like an email once every 6 months. That is the number one place where you can increase your revenue by 5 times, 10 times without feeling like you have to churn out loads and loads of content. The content that you use on your social media should be the thing that's pushing people into your emails and your SMS messages. So I've not gone in depth here about the funnel. The funnel is basically like, I'll quickly give you a summary. So the marketing funnel is an expression used to talk about how people go from hearing about you to becoming a customer of you, right? And if you think of it in a funnel shape, right, the top is the biggest and the bottom is the smallest. And it's kind of like, I always say it's kind of like dating or having a friendship. If you go out socially to, let's say, a party, you go to a wedding, you may see someone that you know who's an acquaintance. You say, hi, how are you? Good to see you. And you move on. That is someone who's at the top of the funnel. That is similar to someone who is like maybe a casual follower on social media or someone who just followed you because you went viral. But then you see this person at a wedding or an event and you're like, actually, I think we might get on. Let's go out to lunch. Let's keep talking. And then you exchange phone numbers. Maybe now you know their surname, and you actually have a friendship there. That is kind of what you want to be thinking about when you build the flow and the experience of people getting to know you and your brand more. So there can be a lot of focus on like, we need more views, we need more followers. But it's like, if you're not doing anything with your first like 1,000 followers here and you're not bringing them into your fold and into your world, I would say don't even bother, because don't even bother to try and grow, because as you continue to grow, you're just inviting all these people to a party and they're just like many acquaintances. An acquaintance for the most part is not going to pick you up from the airport. An acquaintance is not going to come and help you move house. An acquaintance is not going to necessarily help you like, you know, write your CV for that next job. You want people to come and experience you a bit more like a bit more directly. Another thing I'd add to this actually is not just emails and a text, but I'd say like now with Instagram broadcast channels, that's another way. And it's basically this idea of like, okay, how do I go from if I follow someone casually on social media, I probably will never see their post again, right? That happens to so many of us. Or we only see like 5% of posts that we 5% of people's posts out of all the people that we follow. But if someone signed up to your broadcast channel, they're going to get notification. If someone is signed up to your emails and they check their emails, which people do, everyone tells me no one checks their emails. The revenue that is generated by my clients through emails, I can tell you that people are checking, or at least the people who are ready to buy are checking. And at the end of the day, as you build your business, that is your true customer. Your followers who like follow you and maybe don't even comment, they're not your ideal customer, right? There may be the periphery of an ideal customer, but your ideal customer is someone that's going to buy from you. The people who are going to buy are going to be on their emails checking. The people that you text, you know, a text that comes up on your phone versus like me searching an algorithm, that is where you want people to be. It's very important. If you haven't established that now, even if you feel like I only have 100 followers, start now, because you'll also build the habit of preparing for what that needs, like preparing for when you do have that large number of people coming in at the top of the funnel. What are you going to do with them, right? It's better to build it now rather than later. And there's lots of products that are great for this. So on emails, I said the number one is Klaviyo. It plugs into Shopify. It's an email sending system. And some people sometimes ask me, how many emails should I send? And I'd say, like, you know, if you're getting started, 1 to 2 a month is good. If you can, once a week is amazing. And then as the business grows, some people send them multiple times a week. First thing I always get when I talk about this stuff is people are like, well, I don't want to annoy people. True. But again, this goes back to your why, right? If you're sending me 4 emails a week saying, buy this, buy this, buy this, that's annoying. If you're sending me, let's say, a busy executive who wants to be inspired by the latest fashion, I'm just using myself as an example. If you're sending me an email that says, here are our top 4 fashion picks this week, that's not annoying to me because that's an interest of mine. So I am happy to receive that. And the data will also show you in terms of the number of people opening it up and subscribing / unsubscribing. That's not annoying to me. That's great because you're doing something fun and valuable for me. And then this is also great for service businesses. So using Community and ConvertKit and Attentive. To be honest, both of these have text, the ability to text. Klaviyo also includes text in it. So if you have a product-based business and that you operate on Shopify, you kind of have everything in one. I always, again, simple is better. If you can do it all on one platform rather than like trying to piece together 100 different things, it makes your life much easier. So yeah, so let's recap. And I think we're actually at time. Oh my gosh, we're at time. I need to go quicker because I want to have time for questions. 4 essential marketing strategies, which are keep a 1 to 3 product strategy, always ask why, expand your focus beyond your products and service. Remember the Red Bull example, and then go behind the scenes. Build your direct communication channels with people. Don't rely on the world of Mark Zuckerberg or whoever else, ByteDance, whoever else owns the algorithms. Don't rely on them to have that one-to-one relationship with your audience, because that they are inviting you to their party, to their wedding, to be at that moment, whereas you could actually be exchanging numbers and building a private relationship with your customers. And the people who follow you there, they're not always going to be, you're not going to have 10,000 followers and 10,000 people on your email list. It will always be a smaller number, but it's always better to serve a smaller number of people who care more and who are ready to spend more with you than to try and overserve all the people higher up in the funnel. So yeah, and then, so if you want to learn more of exactly how I do it, I am sharing more after this session. For the rest of December, I'm opening up the gates to Marketing School, which is like a dedicated program to go in depth on some of what I've spoken about. So you can see this is like examples of our previous work, but you can learn more about how we do it. And yeah, thank you for listening. I feel like it's been gone quickly, but actually we've been here for a minute. So I am more than happy to answer some questions, and I would say start shooting away in the chat because we do only have a couple of minutes left. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abiola. People are already saying they found it so valuable, so many gems, says Amanda. Yes, Russells, we're going to share the video recording in the next couple of days. And yeah, I can already tell that everyone's found it really, really interesting. I'm going to read out the questions and then just for you to answer them. So Phoebe has said, if you were to focus on only 1 to 2 forms of social, what platforms would you choose and why?
Great question, Phoebe. So if I was to choose between 1 to 2 like social platforms only, I would first of all think about like, so what is my business and where am I, what is my business? Who are my customers? Again, back to this thing of like, who are my customers, right? Very, very important. Who are my customers? So I had a client who I worked with probably for like 5 years. And one of the things they sold was like training courses, right? And their training courses, I think like they were selling like £100,000 training courses. That was like £100,000 subscription for a year. And their target audience was corporates. So LinkedIn was more important to us than maybe like an Instagram. We had Instagram, but LinkedIn was very important. But then we also realized that there was this other side. This was also in the tech world. And we realized that, okay, even though we're selling to corporates, on Twitter, tech Twitter is like all over. Oh, tech Twitter is like a real thing. Like it really changes the face of tech. And executives and also individual contributors are also on Twitter. So those were our 2 places. And that's where we were going viral. And that's what was driving the business. And the business started to turn over millions and millions of pounds from being like something that was bootstrapped from scratch. So for me, again, you remember what I said about like know your customer? That's the question. The question isn't like, which is better, TikTok or this? The question is like, where are my people? Number one, not just where are my people, but also what are the resources at my disposal? I'll quickly talk about TikTok because I think TikTok has kind of like thrown this assumption into the air a little bit, which is like, okay, well, everyone's like, this is where I can grow. TikTok is like so easy for me to grow. I'm just going to do TikTok. TikTok is definitely valuable in that sense because right now TikTok is like the algorithm is designed to basically reward anyone who makes content so you can go viral. So I'd say TikTok for the most part is probably good for most people because you want to share ideas and you have a high propensity for going viral. But the issue with TikTok that many people face is that it's great for discovery. So remember this thing I said about like marketing, the top of the funnel is kind of like going to a big party or an event or a wedding where like you see loads of people, but you don't really know them. And that's what happens on TikTok. People go viral. Like I always think that probably by the time all of us are on TikTok, we would have all gone viral at some point. That doesn't mean we would have all been able to build a business. So just be mindful about using TikTok for that. That may change. And, you know, they may see this like this session, and they may see some of the other stuff I've said about them and think, okay, now we need to find a way to get people further in the funnel, and they are doing that in some ways. But again, understand like the reason why a platform works and what you need it for and what your audience needs. If you're really new, that could be a great place to start. I think it's really valuable. It's just about understanding like the different mechanics. I'll stop there and wait for the next question.
Thank you for that. I hope you found that useful, Phoebe. Umi Tony says, I read your newsletter that suggests leaning on more experienced advisors to give you top-line direction and feedback every month or quarter. Is this a service that you offer, or can you suggest any? And secondly, in the 1 to 3 product groups releases, how often do you suggest doing this? For example, once a quarter?
Great. So I'm going to work backwards from your question in terms of like 1 to 3 product group releases. So the question of how often is really interesting. And again, this is where like you have to crunch your numbers. So for example, if I was making a phone, may not be the best example, but if I was making a phone, I probably couldn't release it every quarter because the cost that it takes me, and if I was releasing a phone and I was a startup, the cost that it will take me, I can't afford to do that, right? So you have to also crunch your numbers, like what makes sense from a margin and profitability standpoint. It's not just like a frequency thing. Now, let's say you were Apple, who have actually, I think they're actually a good example because they have announced that they are no longer releasing iPhones every year anymore. They have looked at, the reason I also suggest doing like product launches in 1 to 3 groups is because you can learn quicker. So Apple have looked at the data for however many years they've looked back, and they've realized, you know what, growth has slowed down, demand has slowed down. We don't need to release an iPhone every year because actually it's not making sense financially the way that it used to. Now, there was probably another time, like, I don't know, 12 years ago, where the demand was so frequent that they were like, oh, if we bring something out new every year, people are going to be excited and buy it anyway. So that would have changed. Like the reasoning and the sequencing has changed, which is again why I say use the 1 to 3 product strategy, because the first time you launch something, it helps you learn, right? So I have a client who has one product, pretty much one product. They've been going for a year, and that's it. They haven't released anything else because the demand is still there. They're still noticing that people are also learning about them. They're still new, so they don't want to add loads of things and put a weight on themselves in terms of product development, cost to produce, have all this stock sitting. They'd rather just like continue to be known for this one thing and keep kind of like maximizing that and learning as much as possible before making that decision. There's no hard and fast rule. The best thing that you can do is use all the data that comes in, like as it comes in, basically, like little by little. And then your note about like, is this a service I offer, and our top line direction, etc. I'll do that one quickly because it's kind of like we can take that offline. But we are closed to our new customers pretty much until February, just because we are booked up. But that is why I'm also opening marketing school, because it has been, I launched it at the beginning of this year, and it allowed me to basically do like digital group coaching with new business owners over a period of 6 weeks. So it was like a great way to start and build the foundations without necessarily paying thousands for a agency or consultant. Yeah, it's only a few hundred, and then it gives you the tools and you have kind of access to it for life pretty much, for as long as the website's open, to continue to learn and ask questions. So I can give you, I can send you all a link if you want to learn more about that. We'll be talking a bit more about it tomorrow, actually, not next week. And it opens in a couple of days. So I can give you that, but that's that. I know we're 1 minute over. Courtney, do we have any more time to answer maybe?
We can answer a few more questions, I think. Yeah, because I've noticed it's gone past 7. Yeah, we'll answer a few more questions. But in the meantime, there's a QR code on your screen, so please scan the QR code and make sure you share feedback about this session. I already know that loads of you loved it. You're all saying thank you in the chat, so just bring that energy to that form. I'm also going to put it in the chat here, so just you can click that if you can't scan the QR code, and just let us know what you thought. We'll find it really useful, and we're also compiling a case study about all of these masterclasses, so make sure you share your feedback. Just to go back to the questions, Ruben has said, how do you assess which influencers to work with? Do more followers always lead to more sales?
Love this question. So again, like hopefully it doesn't sound like I'm just kind of like going back and forth. It's kind of like a how long is a piece of string question, but I'll talk to you about what all the considerations that we take into account. And I've actually been running an influencer campaign this week with someone in my team. So it's like very front of mind. So you have to think about this, how you should think about any campaign, whether it's influencer, whether it's like a Facebook ad, whether it's a content campaign. What is my goal? So is your goal at this point, as a brand, is your goal to get people to know who you are? Or is your goal to make a sale? Remember this idea of like, I don't think I said it in this way, but you know how I said the funnel is like building a relationship? For the most part, when you meet someone the first day, you don't say that they're your best friend, or you don't propose to them and get married that day, right? There are steps. So as a business that's new in the market, the first thing that you may be wanting to say to people isn't buy this, buy this, buy this. You may just be like, hey, we exist, like this is us kind of thing. And sometimes an influencer that has a good following, and I'll quickly talk about what good following means in a second. An influencer that has a good following is going to help you do that. Hey, we exist. And depending on how many people already know your business, that is important, right? They don't have to drive sales. So sometimes I hear things like, well, I worked with this influencer and it didn't do anything. And it's like, well, what did you want them to do? What was the direction that what was your like goal? Now, what does it mean to be like have a good following, right? Big is helpful, not gonna lie. Think of influencers as also like a billboard, right? So if you have a billboard in Oxford Street, you know that Oxford Street has however many thousands of people walking through it a week, versus if you had a billboard in an alleyway in the suburbs, right? So that's kind of like how size really matters for influencers. But because they're human beings and not billboards, some influencers don't have the biggest following in the world, but you know from their audience and from their engagement rate that they are really respected by, they may only have 5,000 followers, but they are really respected by that community. And you will know that by doing things like looking at how many comments they're getting, looking at, you know, if you follow them, which is sometimes helpful before deciding to work with someone, whether people are like commenting on their stories, how active they are, like how loved they are is like a really important thing, because there could be an influencer, like I said, that has 5,000 followers, but when they say buy something, 40 people will buy it. Or when they say sign up to this thing, 100 people will sign up, versus someone who's bigger and maybe doesn't have that same effect. I'm going to send you a engagement calculator, because sometimes I use something called Tribe, but it's more of an enterprise level. But Flanks, it gives you the ability to run creators through this platform and see what their average engagement rate is. And that can also tell you if they've got good engagement or not, especially in the days where people like will hide their following number, or like hide their number of hide their like number, or like hide their comments. This is on Instagram. For TikTok, it varies a bit more, because like if you look at most creators, their TikTok engagement always varies because the algorithm just always varies. But yeah, those are all the things I think about. You really need to think about what's your goal, first of all. Sometimes it is just awareness, right? Which is the top of the funnel. It's just people knowing like, oh, okay, I know that brand. And sometimes it is sales, but I think sales, again, is like further in the funnel when people are engaging with you and on your newsletter and in your emails, and they kind of love what you're doing. So yeah. I will pause there.
Amazing. I hope you found that useful, Ruben. I'm afraid, guys, we don't have time for any more questions, but thank you so much for joining this masterclass. And if you'd like to catch up with Abiola, she's put all her URLs in the chat, so make sure to click on those. Like I said at the start of this session, this is our very last masterclass as part of Good for Growth, but you can watch all other masterclasses at growwithjamii.com. We have about 6 others. This is the 7th, and we'll be putting this online latest by Friday. So make sure if you miss anything or just want to catch up with anything you've missed, make sure that you watch those back. We also have a few blog posts on there for you to read up on as well. I hope you found all these masterclasses really useful, and I hope you found this one valuable as well. Thank you again for being part of it, and everyone enjoy